Yeah, and this is interesting because I worked on this story yesterday. The judge had a ruling in the case, and there's a group of 8 kids, I think they're 12 to 16, who have sued to get the state to do something about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So their argument is that the government has a duty to protect natural resources under the state constitution, and that by not reducing carbon emissions, that they are violating the kids' constitutional rights to a healthy environment. The judge earlier this week said that the kids could actually sue the state, the governor, and the department that's in charge of regulating greenhouse gas emissions. So they were pretty excited about that. Yeah, this is part of an effort by an Oregon-based group, and they have taken some type of action in most states across the country. There's a federal case in Eugene that last month a judge allowed the kids to sue the Obama administration on the same arguments. So it's kind of interesting. I think it's kind of unprecedented. And we'll see where it goes. That trial won't start until sometime in the spring, I believe. I talked in person with the kids over a period of time, and they really know their stuff. You know, they know their arguments. They know what their rights are. They may not know all the legal duties, but one of the moms had told me that there was the Seattle case started because the kids are part of this environmental group, and they had talked about what could they do to affect climate change, and this is how it came up. And I'm sure it's part lawyer led, part kid led, but the kids definitely know their stuff and know what they're fighting for. That's my sense anyway in interviewing them. They're very impressive.
That's cool. I like that story. And yes, I do feel that we all have a role to play in and a responsibility, as well as the state and the country and the government to make sure they regulate properly for all the emission controls and stuff. Yeah, great story. Thanks for posting.
Single finger double tap to stop button.
Before I respond to the content of this article, I want to say that, it's one thing to debate whether severe climate change is real or not, or to debate whether these children had a right or not to sue the government and whether the judge was correct or not in allowing them to sue. But to just come on and bash these on-air people over and over again, I believe is just inappropriate and shameful. And I'm sorry to any on-air journalist who has to hear this kind of behavior. You guys are doing a good job. A lot of these articles are very informative and insightful, and I appreciate the articles that I do get to hear. Some of them maybe not as interesting as others, but to each their own. To the point on this, I was actually really interested in hearing that this happened. I wasn't aware that this is something that could be adjudicated in this way, that these children were able to do this and that the judge allowed it. So I think that this is something that's very important, and I would expect that you'd see a lot more of this going forward, especially now the precedent has been set more than once. This might be some way to get a bigger conversation happening about climate change, and around surrounding the discussion of whether it's real or not, or harmful or not. I, for one, do believe that it is real and that it is harmful and causing issues. And so I think that for the people, and no matter what it is, whether it's climate change, whether it's poverty, whatever the reason, whatever the situation, if it's something that is determined to be our right, our human right as people, as Americans, as citizens, or as just people on the planet, no matter what country we live in, if it's found that our rights are being violated and that the government is not doing what they're supposed to do or what they should do by law or otherwise, then I think something like this can be important. I'm not a sue happy person. I'm not always going to be the one out there saying, "Oh, go sue here, sue there," because I don't believe that that's always an answer either. But sometimes, in order to get bureaucracy and red tape moving, sometimes this is what you've got to do. So, thank you very much for this story. I found this very interesting. I can agree that the original presentation of On Air was mishandled by Tom R. and the development team of Orail. The implementation is fine, but describing to the community how it worked and why it works the way it does was poorly done. I agree with that. He still really hasn't explained it fully or properly, but in bits and pieces, we've all figured it out, and it's now widely known how it works and why it is the way it is. And for someone to come in to an on-air thread and bash the journalist and be rude to the journalist, I believe is inappropriate, because the journalist is participating in a service that's been offered to them for them to come and share their stories they've written, and share those with us for us to then discuss and debate on their time. And so to bash them, again, I believe is just inappropriate and isn't going to get us anywhere. If you have a problem with the way Tom R implemented it, if you have a problem with the way he presented it to the community, that's fine. Go take that up with Tom R. But I don't think it's the right thing to do to take it out on the journalists themselves. And that was why I said what I said at the beginning of my post. Now, furthermore, Chris, your first post, the whole post was to bash the journalist, and the bash, just the mere discussion of climate change. You didn't say whether you agreed with it or not. You didn't try to discuss or debate it or not. You didn't discuss anything relevant properly to the post or the story itself that was presented here. So for you to come in back and say that I'm not discussing or debating it, calling me names, if you listen to the rest of my post after I said what I said at the beginning to the journalist, I did talk about the story specifically. I talked about my opinion about climate change and how I feel it is real. You keep saying that, oh, this person should talk about something real. Come on, journalists, talk about something that's real and on air. And making fun of on air and saying that she should discuss something real. But then you even admit that climate change is real. So which is it? Is this a real topic to discuss? Is climate change real and should be discussed? Or is this a trash, inappropriate post to be put out here? You're speaking out both sides of your mouth here. I did discuss the question. I did give my opinions about it. I'm not on the sidelines at all. I was right there in the thick of it, discussing what was presented to us in this post.
So do we all have a role to play? Certainly I think so. Is suing the best way to go about it? Well, I'm a technology guy, so I actually think that technical innovation is the best way to go about it. If you start suing the government, then the government instigates regulations. Who do regulations impact most but the poorest people who can't afford a new, yuppie, smug mug, latte-infested, suburbanite, expensive vehicle that has all the latest and greatest bells and whistles, including climatically controlled, emissions reduced types of things. So that the poorest among us will get charged the most for these offenses. I have a huge problem with that. Anybody who is serious about this is going to work on, and there are a lot of people who are apparently very serious about it, a lot of millennials are involved in green technology, is going to be working on green technology, which means it's highly functional, it's smarter and better than the old stuff, and yet it's more energy efficient. The way to solve, nobody sued our way to penicillin. Nobody sued our way to the light bulb. And nobody sued our way to the car, the same car that we now complain about, but which was called pollution reducer because of all the gases from rotting horse poop in the streets that were the affects of horses and flies and all the rest of it from all these horses in the big cities. And it was awful for people living there. The motor car was seen as the solution to that pollution problem back in the 1890s. Nobody sued their way to that. It was innovation. And that's what we need to stimulate. We need to have, instead of social justice classes in college, we need to have more technological stuff. I think the millennials doing environmental science is brilliant. It's a cross-disciplinary field, and it contains a lot of positive advantages. I think that there's a tremendous amount that can be done. But yelling and screaming and suing and claiming people are triggered on Twitter is not the way to get it done. These children that are suing the government are doing so because somebody has put them up to it. It's not their fault. And do they have the right to sue? Well, I don't know. Apparently the judge is saying that they do. So what will happen is we'll have regulations that will probably penalize working class people who can't afford a better car. And all these latte-infested smug mugs with their brand new vehicles that are so quiet that I, as a blind man, almost get hit by them periodically as I'm crossing the road, which is actually kind of interesting. If they're going to hit me, they need to hit me at high enough speed so that it's over quicker. But it's never the holier than thous that pay the price, is it? They're the ones sitting up on top of their mountain of gold telling everybody else what to do, like Smaug the dragon in The Hobbit and other books. They're sitting on their golden cup, I think that it's the wrong answer. I think innovation is the correct answer. If somebody makes a alternate fuel source cheaper than oil, the oil companies will scamper and they will get out of the oil business as fast as they can. They're in profit to make money. They're not in the business to sell oil. They're in the business to make money. If somebody comes up with a better alternative that's not releasing carbon, that's what needs to be invested in. There was a time in this country, and it was a conservative actually who did it, modern conservatives notwithstanding, but where science and technology was so heavily invested that a decade and a half after that investment began, we had people on the moon. There isn't any reason why we couldn't do that now with green technologies. And investing in green technologies, some of them are going to fail. Some of them will succeed, some of them will fail. That's part of working out how a new technology is going to work. So, yeah, I'm definitely on board with actual solutions rather than just more rules, more regulations, more sticking it to people, especially working class people. Those are the people who are going to get stuck to. Not the latte swinging smug mugs. They're going to be out there smugging around and thinking they're so wonderful. And, innovation is what, as my father's generation used to say when we were getting a little smug, will wipe that smug off their face. Innovation. That's what we need to be investing in, not more lawsuits, not more stuff to give people more rules that basically are going to apply more to working class, poorer people who can't afford a better situation. Yeah. Innovation is what will change the whole game.
Actually, there are a number of people that have standing. Certainly, children do. I believe that that's one of the arguments that was being, put forward in relation to the Keystone Pipeline, which was that not even by virtue of the pipeline itself, or what it might disrupt along the route, was that the oil should be left in the ground where God Almighty put it and buried it forever and ever and ever. That it should never be burned, and anything that facilitates its removal and transport is a bad thing. And I know that now that, with that victory, there are groups that, since you can trace the exploration of oil and its removal from the ground to its eventual burning, that believe they have standing to object to that. Of course, most of us know that there's two kinds of oil on the planet, one of which is already burnt, and the other of which, if it's not burnt today, it will be burnt or otherwise used in time. If not burnt, then made into plastic to float around the ocean eventually, but or dumped into a landfill. But no, there's lots of people that are seeking to change. They have standing, or think they do, on controlling 1/1,000,000th of 1% of what would be a contribution to global warming, or climate change. And by the way, climate change is not just the burning of fossil fuels. The same analysis could go into building another shopping center, out further where there's less congestion, or building another subdivision, the big houses people build. Actually, it's interesting. My son, and I'm not sure if he was just joking or if he's serious, he says, really, not only people in this country, but the rest of the world should insist on a one child per couple limit. In this, particularly in the United States, since a child in the United States, through the course of his life, will use about 14 times the carbon that children in most of the rest of the world would use, just not only through the act of breathing and eating, but the inefficient ways in which we do it. Farming animals, that's a greenhouse gas emitting activity. Besides the land use and the feed, there's also the methane. So before we get into specific policies of mitigating climate change, there needs to be more agreement on which policies have the most effect, which contributions are the worst and need to be curbed, and which policies are environmentally and also economically sustainable. I mean, basically, what will society and the world tolerate, in terms of rapid change. By the way, bringing this around to the perspective of the blind community, vibrant central cities with good public transportation systems are a great equalizer. For those of us who can't drive, and B, there would be much more equality economically. A blind person in a rural area or some suburb that's 20 suburbs out but doesn't have public transportation and can't easily get to the nearest mall is going to have difficulties compared to other people. And so the same policies that mitigate climate change could help us in addition. So, very interesting article, but it only tells a small part of the story. And I think, while a group of kids suing, and of course nobody's won anything yet, while a group of kids suing is a good thing, maybe there needs to be a more broad consensus worked out as to how to move forward.
Again, I'd like to apologize to the kind lady journalist from the Associated Press. I'm sorry I don't remember your name, but I'm sorry that your thread is being hijacked right now. Chris, you're actually incorrect. The Vorel app was not originally developed for blind people at all. It may have been thought of as a social experiment, and yes, I do remember when Tom R. sent Andrea a private message where he implied that this is a social experiment and he'd run it the way he would like to run it. I do remember that. I participated in that thread. I understand that that's what he said many, many months after the app was launched. But the birth of this app had nothing to do with blind people. If you go back and listen to interviews that they've given, things that they've talked about, go to the AppleVis interview that they did, the intent of this app was not specifically for blind people. Not in the beginning. It became that over time. So what you're stating is incorrect, and that can be documented in the interviews and the information that they have provided themselves. So again, I don't know what you're talking about, and honestly, I don't know how that's relevant to the discussion about On Air. On Air is just a separate piece of the app that's been added for us to participate in, for us to discuss and debate issues with real, actual journalists from major news outlets. It's actually a pretty interesting way to interact. Unfortunately, it's not a direct first-person interaction, as you say, but that's the way Tom R. and the developers have chosen to implement it at this time, because most likely they understand that these journalists may not have an iPhone. Maybe they don't have an iPhone to install the app onto to participate first person. So he's provided a voicemail system in order for them to participate so that they can leave this information to the developers, and then they can put it out here for us, and then they can listen and respond accordingly. That's the system that's been put in place. Like it or love it, that's the system. If you don't like it, don't take it out on the journalists. That's all I'm saying. I just don't believe that it's appropriate to take it out on the journalists. They're doing this on their personal time, participating in a system for us. They don't have control over how the system works. Tom R. does. So I'm just saying, if you want to debate or discuss one of the on-air questions, fine. Do that. You did not do that in your original post. I did. You did not. But if you have a problem with the way Tom R. implemented the on-air system and you don't like it, then either don't answer these questions or take your problems or your questions and concerns to Tom R. That's all I'm saying, Chris.
So since I have Chris Rabbit muted since God knows when, I don't really have full impact of what he's saying, but I can gather enough of information from what I've been hearing so far. No, Vorel was not originally made for blind people. That has been pointed out several times. How did it eventually get to the point where it's a blind predominant app? And that's a different story altogether. I think at this point we should just leave this whole issue alone, because we are contributing in hijacking this thread. We're taking this further and further away from its original intent, and this is the kind of thing that it's most irritating. I know it's very irritating when it happened to my thread, and I know it irritates a lot of people when it happened to their thread. And so I think we should just keep at the issue at hand and talk about what the journalist is actually trying to talk about here. But I do have to say that to go after journalists in the on-air section, it's a kind of rude and childish behavior. I mean, if you don't like it, you don't listen, or you don't skip. You just skip it. But to go in there and attack journalists when they put in their time to share their thought with the community, that shows just a level of immaturity that shouldn't be tolerated.
Well, let me start off by saying I apologize for any interruptions of coughing, wheezing, raspy voice, or nurses and aides interrupting. I am currently in a rehab facility because of an injury to my arm. Now, secondly, I would like to apologize to the journalist who's had her thread hijacked by a gentleman from Australia who really, as he put it, does not know shit from Shinola. I truly apologize for his behavior and his actions. Then I want to address Mr. Chris Rabbit, smiling pile of poo, whose name, I think, by the way, is quite stupid. But I don't attack him every day for his name. So he should not be attacking other people because he doesn't like something that is going on. Chris, you need to get your facts straight, not the other way around. And as for him not being a man of honor, he's got far more honor than you will ever have, Tim the Enchanter. I mean, he is a fine, upstanding man in his community that contributes a great deal. Probably in far more ways than you ever could imagine yourself doing. Again, I apologize. So now, as to this issue at hand, I'm not a litigious person, and I don't promote litigation. Now, I am, in fact, National Association of Legal Assistants certified paralegal. I work for an attorney, a very well-respected attorney, or at least I did. Let me rephrase it. I did work for him. My intentions are to go back to work for him at some point. That's neither here nor there, though. I don't know why. Anyway, here's the point I'm trying to make. What these kids did was right based on the way they were led. Now, I say no self-respecting attorney would have helped guide these children in this direction. I say it was an ambulance chaser. Somebody looking to make a quick buck, and he saw an opportunity with children. I say pathetic, very pathetic. I think global warming is a very serious issue. I don't think greenhouse emissions have a whole lot to do with the climate change. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm completely ignorant here. But I'm thinking plants omit chloroform or chlorophyll, chloroform. Boy, I'm about as out of it as it gets. But I think that I thought plants emitted something that was naturally acceptable to climate. So maybe I'm off base here. Maybe I'm completely ignorant. Maybe I'm speaking out of my ass here, basically. And I do apologize for my language, but maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But here's my thing. I thought, as I said, I thought greenhouses were good for the climate. I thought that plants were good for the environment. So I'm not sure how plants can be bad for the environment, but apparently somebody feels they are. I just think that no self-respecting, good attorney would have led these kids down this path. And I think that in and of itself is wrong. Now, what the kids did was the way they felt best based on the information they were given. So I don't hold this against the kids, but I do hold it against their parents and the litigious, pompous, money-grubbing lawyer that took on this case for them. Bad apples. Chris Rabbit, and the bad apple that took on this case. Both of you should be ashamed. And again, ma'am, I am truly sorry that your thread was hijacked by some ignorant fool from Australia like that. Many Australians are not that stupid, and nor are the Americans. So, pardon my ignorance in this situation, but that was my 2 cents, and thank you for allowing me to share. And thank the developers for allowing us to share. Regardless of how you choose to present it, it's acceptable to me because you've made it very clear I get no say in this at all anyway. So, but thank you for giving me an opportunity in some way to share my opinions.